Please join me in welcoming the director of Laggies, Lynn Shelton.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you so much for coming, and thank you, not to suck up or anything, but I really love TIFF, and I really love your city.
They love it. Suck up
It's true.
Okay, do we have a question in the audience to start with? If not, I have one. We spoke a little bit about this the other day, but this is the first one of your films that you haven't also written. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that was like.
Well, yeah, I've read many scripts over the last few years, and it's very rare that I feel drawn in enough on a personal level to feel like I'm a good fit as a director for it, and that I really need to direct this film. And this was one of those rare exceptions. The writer's voice of Andrea Siegel felt, I don't know, I just had a real affinity for the way that she wrote dialogue, and that the way the humor comes from a very character-based place, and this mix of drama and comedy. And then I loved the territory as well of this 28-year-old woman in this extended adolescent role that I felt like I'd seen a lot of men get to explore that kind of territory ever since like The Graduate, you know, with Dustin Hoffman. But very rarely had I seen women get to be allowed to be kind of fumbling their way towards their identity and who am I, and ask those questions. So anyway, the experience of it was great because she was such a wonderful collaborator and was really egoless about notes I gave her, and then was extremely generous, giving me her blessing to just say, you know, this is your baby now, make your movie out of it. So it was really a lovely experience, actually.
Okay, any questions in the crowd there? Yes, just down in front. Yeah. Ah, the title.
Yes, the title. So it's funny, Andrea actually originally wrote this movie to be set in Orange County, which is a part of Los Angeles with a very specific flavor. And I like to make all my movies where I live in Washington State, in Seattle. So I kind of translated it for that region. And she says that when she and her high school buddies hung out, they used that term all the time. You know, like, oh, come on, Laggies, we're late to go to the mall, or whatever. And she thought it was odd that I had never heard that term before, and it turned out that, in fact, it's not common parlance, except maybe amongst her friends growing up in Orange County. And so I thought that we would probably end up changing the name, but I came to really embrace it, and liked how it's evocative, like you sort of feel like you can guess what it means, you know, and that there's a little bit of a mystery to it. Also the fact that we came up with a list of alternatives and they all seem so generic. And the one advantage with this one is, I think it's pretty singular. I don't know if there are going to be a lot of other movies that are going to name themselves Laggies, so we stuck with it, and yeah, hopefully it'll work.
Okay, any other questions? It's down here again.
Yeah, I saw the last movie that played here, and I think you said you had like a 12-page script with a lot of it was improv.
The question was just about how much of this was improv. He remembered you talking a little bit about that when you were here with your sister's sister.
Yeah, so prior to this film, I'd made several movies that were either largely or entirely improvised. The dialogue was improvised, and we had a sort of armature in which to let the actors play in. In this case, it was, I'd say, 98% scripted. I was counting last night as I sat through it, and there were a few lines here and there. I was remembering the young actor who improvised, yeah, it's Jupiter except with two P's. That was improvised. Fantastic local Seattle actor. Yeah, and Sam sometimes would throw in, you know, he'd kind of rephrase things, and when they're like playing with the skateboard, you know, there were moments in the film that were improvised. He actually putting the strainer on his head, bringing the banana out to, you know, swashbuckle with poor Daniel. That moment was completely improvised to try and get this reaction shot on the actors' faces of like, what the hell is he doing? So he likes to surprise his fellow actors. But for the most part, we really felt like the lines worked great, and they were written in such a way that the actors were able to make them their own, so we didn't feel the need to improvise this time.
Okay, yes, just down in front. Can you talk about the casting of the film?
Yeah, sure. So actually, it's interesting, a few months before we shot, Anne Hathaway attached to play the part that Keira played, and she was really excited about it, and we very quickly were able to get Chloë and Sam on board after that. And then she was forced to make a decision because of scheduling between this project, which she had just attached to, and another project that she'd been attached to for a very long time, which I believe was Chris Nolan's Interstellar. And she was really heartbroken about it, but and very, very sad, but she had to drop out. And then Keira was the first person we came to after that, and she luckily was an easy yes, because we were only a couple months away. And I thought of, whenever I think of Keira, I always think of the first films that I saw her in, which were Bend It Like Beckham and the first Pirates movie. And I just remember being so struck by this 16, 17-year-old woman who was just so confident and so physically funny and game, and so I remembered that kind of side of her, and was really dying to see it come out again, in this kind of contemporary role. And it was so lovely to see her just dancing her butt off, doing the sign twirling, and just letting herself roll over the couch in her parents' house. And makes me so happy to see her out of a corset.
Speaking a little bit about the talent again, I found that they all had such lovely chemistry together, whether it was between Chloë and Sam, Sam and Keira, or Keira and Sam. Can you maybe talk a little bit about just what it was like on set and how they all kind of bonded?
Yeah, well, as soon as Keira and Chloë got to Seattle, I took them out to dinner, and we had this nice long, like 3-hour-long dinner, and it was really just so they could get to know each other. And the thing about all of those actors is that they are so warm and open-hearted as humans, as people, that they really came to the project with this optimism and this vulnerability, to really bond, and they really did. And so as much time as I was able to, I would give them time to kind of hang out, off set, and it really helps, because once the actors are genuinely friends, then that chemistry is just, very organic on the screen.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? Anybody on the balcony? There's one. Oh, yep. Oh, go ahead.
That's great. Is the ending always that Keira's character would wind up with father?
The question is about the script and the ending. Did it always end that she was going to go back with him or not?
Was there... I mean, she was never going to end up with... She was always going to break up with her fiancé. And I didn't want that to be a complete, a no-brainer from the beginning. I really wanted it to feel like there's nothing wrong with him, and there's nothing really wrong, terribly wrong with the relationship, but it's just one of those relationships that you realize you've kind of outgrown, and and I wanted that breakup scene to feel like a real breakup scene. So that was really important, and we played around with that just to get the nuance right. And I think she was always going to end up with Sam's character. I think there was some discussion about the fact that, it really is about this woman taking agency in her own life and not being passive anymore and just kind of floating along. And there was a little bit of a worry that we didn't want it to be about the guy, that it's like she's trading one guy for another guy, and that's kind of like what it's about. But at the same time, we felt like it would be giving it short shrift for her not to be able to explore this new connection she's had with this guy. So I'm hoping it doesn't seem like, oh, they're going to get married and, live happily ever after, but at least they get to, explore this connection they've had.
Earlier you talked about always liking to film in Seattle, in your home state. I think one of the other things that struck me about this film is that it's a part of Seattle we don't often see. And I think also there's some lighting choices I think that you made kind of with the different locations in Seattle. Can you just talk about what it's like to film there and your choices here?
Sure. So I'm trying to think of a way to describe Orange County, where the film was originally set as kind of, I guess, Reagan country. It's a very conservative part of Los Angeles, and So the equivalent in Seattle is the east side. There's a lake, Lake Washington, and on the east side of the lake is just a little bit more of a conservative, a little more Republican population, and it's a newer, it used to be suburbs, that's now sort of a newer city. So there's a lot of developments, a lot of condos or townhouses. And I have friends who grew up on that side of the lake and then never really quite felt at ease until they moved to Seattle, which has a very different flavor. It's been around longer, and it has a more progressive kind of urban vibe to it. And so I didn't want to overplay it, but I did, for my own sake. It was really nice for me to have that divide where she and her high school buddies grew up on the east side, and then Sam and Chloe's characters are on the west side, and she ends up over there because of this wedding location. If just being able to shoot and film in the region that I live in, and I also have made all my movies in, is such a gift, because there's this incredibly beautiful family of collaborators that I get to work with, and they've become dear, dear friends over the years. And to be able to actually give them, this is the largest budget movie I've worked on, so to be able to give them, a full package of bells and whistles and G&E equipment and, toys to play with, it was really delightful.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Yes, in the middle, the yellow.
I can't remember if Keira doing an American accent. How is it as a director that you feel confident in casting somebody that, is Australian or British or whatever, and then expecting them to do a good American accent?
The question is about Keira's accent. He doesn't remember her doing an American accent before, but as a director, when you look to casting people from the UK or Australia or wherever, how do you feel confident in their ability to be able to take that on?
Yeah, this was the first time I had ever asked somebody to not speak on set with their own native accent, and it was a little bit of a, not a huge worry, just because, I don't know, for the most part, aren't all Brits and Australians just great at that? I mean, it seems like the vast majority of them are. But it's true, Keira hasn't had that many opportunities, and I looked and looked for examples, and I couldn't find any. And she had shot this film for Paramount Pictures called, I think, Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit, or something like that, right? But it hadn't come out yet, and they wouldn't, and we were like, could you just give us like a clip of it? Because she was playing an American in it. But the head of Paramount assured our producer that she really nailed it. So on that recommendation, we hired her, and she did such a good job that somebody asked me a couple days ago, he said, I thought she was a British actress, but she's American, and she's just been doing a British accent all those years? No, but that's nice of you to, yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question. And if there's no one out there with one, oh, yes, on the balcony, we haven't got to you yet. Go ahead.
Was any part of the storyline inspired by you or someone that you know?
I think maybe that's more a question for Andrea, the writer, but do you know what inspired her to write the story?
I actually do. The story that she told me is that she was driving down the street in LA one day and stopped at a red light and was watching a young woman twirling a sign, a tax sign or some kind of a sign, and just with a total lack of self-consciousness, just like going for it. Clearly not really, thinking about what she looked like. And she had headphones on and was listening to something deeply moving to her. And Andrea, in her car, was listening to a song that was deeply moving for her. And the combination just really got her wheels turning, and she started thinking about this woman's inner life and her life beyond, the life of a tax sign twirler. And that was kind of the starting point, which I just thought was such a great seed, for something. But I do think she brought in some of her own experiences, and there were a lot of things in it that really spoke to me as well. So even though it wasn't inspired by my personal story, I could relate.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for staying.
Thank you so much.